So what are the different steps to select the right methodology? The first thing is you have to define the research question. You have to be able to categorize it, whether your research question is essentially descriptive, that addresses what happens with the environment and where it happens with the environment. Descriptive researches are often to do with surveys and then mapping and then classification. So these are the kind of descriptive researches that we talk about. And then explanatory, wherein we explain why a certain thing is happening with the environment, or how it is happening. So these are case studies, often modeling is involved. All the climate change researches are essentially modeling based, they are essentially explanatory. We try to explain that these are the causal factors in order to, in order for a specific climate change to be driven, whether positive or a negative, or whether it is radiative forcings, and all this. Also experimental researches, right? Experimental researches also include qualitative and quantitative. Then predictive, what if. So these are simulation models, or you're using machine learning approaches in order to be able to predict what is going to happen in future. Right, so you have to define the research question first. Often this research question has to be two objectives. So yet again, the objectives, right? Match objectives with data. If you have already set your objective, your research question is ready. Now you have to match your objectives with the data. You have to see whether the data that you require is already available, or whether you will have to derive it, whether you will have to produce your own data. When the data is already available, we call it secondary data, somebody else's data that we use. But if we have to generate our data, then we call it primary data. Whether this primary data is available or not, what, how do you get primary data? Field experimentation, also some surveys and things like that, that will bring new data which was earlier not existing. You have generated that data. Also whether you have access to the already available data, right? So if you want to use maybe some government data, some government has already conducted some surveys, and that data, whether you have access to it, whether you will be able to bring it. So that is also important. And then you have to consider the ethical constraints. If a community is participating, then you have to make sure that you take their consent and things like that. Yes, correct, like FSI data, yes, correct. Then choose tools and techniques. Next is, if you have already identified which kind of data is important to you, now you have to choose which tools and which techniques you will use. Whether your techniques are essentially going to be traditional, wherein you will collect field samples, some laboratory experiments you are going to do, and some statistical analysis you are going to do, that is just in terms of percentage and things like that, no. So your data will essentially come in the form of tables, or maybe some traditional graphs, right? Or maybe text description, or describing the samples, or describing the statistical data. So whether it is going to be like that, or whether it is going to be thorough with what is the trend now. So what is the trend now? The trend now is using GIS data. Trend is using remotely sensitive satellite data to study the spatial analysis, using artificial intelligence and machine learning models to predict what might happen with the environment in future. So these are the state of the art methods. These are something that is going on now. It is no more a story of past. It is happening now in present. Any good journal that you take up, any Elsevier journal, if you are in environment, in environmental research, life sciences or earth sciences, what you can do is just go ahead and look out at the different papers that are very relevant to your study. You will realize that they are using machine learning, they are using remotely sensed data, satellite data, different types of satellite data they are using, and things like that. Besides that, citizen science platform for participatory data. Now there are these platforms that are available. I have given a link to this participatory sciences link over here, you can refer to that. So there are these platforms, where government itself, or individuals themselves put out a survey that anybody can go and address, and then that data is made available for researchers, no matter at what corner of the world you lie. So if you find some such data that is coming from such participatory platforms, it is relevant to your study, then why not, you can go ahead, use them. So there are such platforms as well coming up, right? So you have to identify a platform which is dedicated to the kind of data that you are in need of. That's the only question, where do I find? And once you have the data, you can use it. Besides that, you also have to assess the feasibility, whether you have the time to take up the kind of methodology and the tools and techniques that you have selected or not, whether you already have the skills. If you don't have the skills, where do you get the skills from? Maybe from courses, maybe by using the manuals for those techniques and methods, or maybe for using a software you don't really know how to learn it, or maybe that there is no course available for it, so maybe using a manual that is available along with that particular software, or things like that. Besides that, if you know that the data is available, but then to access it, you need some funding. For example, some satellite data, some high resolution satellite image, whether you have funding to bring it to yourself or not, and accessibility, whether you can access it, because some of the data sets are very very confidential only to European countries. You can get them only there, you cannot use them being on Indian subcontinent. Or some data that is only available for the US states, you don't really have them for your country or for the environment that you are looking at. So in this scenario, you also have to look at the kind of data that is being required and its feasibility, that is, whether the required time is there, you possess the skills or not, or whether you can get the skills or not, whether enough funding is available or not, and whether you can access the kind of data that is required in order to take up a particular technique. That is your methodology, correct? The MES methodology is not the most complex one. Often we think that, okay, this particular researcher or the worker has used a wonderful method like machine learning, using machine learning in susceptibility studies and something like that, but I don't really know how to do it, correct? No, that is a problem. I know that it is a complex and very, what I should say, very impressive, a handsome method. But then, what is important is, it is not necessary that the methodology has to be complex. It is more important that the methodology that you use is going to yield relevant data, based on which you will then generalize your findings um, for the study that you did, right? So often what happens is that whenever we try to study something, we don't study the entire environment, we study a small part of it, and then we make our findings, we derive our findings, and then we try to generalize it to the bigger environment, and then see whether they are applicable or not. If they are applicable, well and good. If they are not applicable, then why I could not generalize, why my environment was different than the environment out there. So these are the kind of things that we have to look at. The best methodology is not the most complex one, so don't be fancied by the big methodologies that are out there. Find the best one for you, which is feasible and which is going to yield the best results for you, and stick to it. It's the most practical for your questions and resource. The best methodology is what? It is the one which is most practical for your question to be answered, and also that you have to have the resources. So this is the link that will take you to one of such platforms. So if you go here, you will be understanding as to what exactly I'm talking about when I say citizen science platforms for participatory data. And you will be able to search other platforms like eBird. Many of you all are belonging to life sciences or ecology, I see. So eBird, Atlas, and something like that. No, I am not, I might not really be aware of these things. No, so these are the platforms where some participatory data is available, where many people come together and generate data. Okay, just give me a thumbs up if you have heard of this particular website. A website in the sense of participatory platform, right? Yeah. Okay, so the best practices while you are choosing a methodology, clearly explain why you chose the method. You have to defend why you chose a given method, because you are serious about the method that you have chosen. You cannot let somebody overpower you with the methodology that you have chosen. So you bring your strength into deciding which methodology you are going to use. You have to be very confident, and not just superficially, because somebody might be genuinely trying to, tell you that the methodology that you have chosen is not really nice, but then you should know that yes, what I have chosen is nice, and at the same time nice in the sense the most defensive one, and that if somebody else is trying to correct you, you should be open enough to even look at their perspective. And if they have something good for you in their store, then why not just grab it, right? Then justify with references. You refer to, you don't just fight with somebody who is not agreeing with your methodology. Rather, you give them references that this person has used them in the similar environment to solve the similar problem. They have found relevant results, that is why I'm using it. So back it up with some references. The methodologies can evolve. As time passes through your research, as your research progresses, often methodologies evolve. So you keep that space for your research methodology to breathe and to grow and to evolve as well. This is a dynamic process. Research is a dynamic process. Your objectives, you should prioritize that they don't change, correct? But methodology, because methodology is the path that you take to the objective, the path may change. If there's a cliff, you won't jump over it, isn't it? You have to survive that cliff. So what you will do, you will go around, climb down the slope wherever it is possible, and then climb up the valley to reach your objective. So your path has to be flexible. You should keep that space for your methodology to breathe and to evolve and to grow, such that it becomes, you also grow enough confidence in it that you will defend it with much more attachment. I'm not talking about emotional attachment, I'm essentially talking about the backing up from your references. So don't chase fancy methods, like we have decided earlier. If they don't fit your question, leave them. So you have to find out, is your question descriptive? The kind of research that you are doing, is it descriptive, or is it explanatory, or is it predictive? That's the first step when it comes to selecting your method. Now the message I want to give here is, methodology is not one size fits all. Somebody could be studying the same environment that you are studying, only that it is geographically at a different place. But that doesn't mean that the methodology that they have used, you are also going to use. Not one size fits all. That's not the policy that we are going to follow. There might be some modification that will be required in order to customize the methodology to find your answer. It must fit your question, the data, and the context. Modern research often blends traditional approaches with new AI or artificial intelligence or GIS tools for deeper insights. Also, to evaluate your environment back in past how it was. So often, their GIS as well helps, or remotely sensed data as well helps. Now, research timeline creation. Now, this is an important thing that we are going to discuss. Research timeline is very important, and why it matters, because a research timeline is your roadmap, that trail map that we were talking about. Don't go into the forest without any map. You have to go with a trail map. That is when it will be fun, right? So a research timeline is your roadmap from idea to your final input, maybe in terms of a thesis, maybe a revolutionary idea that you want to pass on to the community, or a revolutionary understanding, something that you have found to the community for the better purpose, or maybe just a manuscript for your career advancement or anything like that. So from idea to your final output, who will take you? It is your research timeline. So a research timeline will help you break your bigger objectives into small small objectives, what we say minor objectives that are achievable, right? So you don't feel like you are cutting the entire mountain. You are excavating smaller hill by hill, and then you one day you break down the entire mountain. So break your big project into small manageable steps, big objectives into small small objectives that will finally achieve your main objective. And stay realistic. Don't fantasize that okay, this is how I will do it, that is how I will do it, in this brief moment I will do it, or with these least efforts or highest efforts I will do it. Don't be fantasizing about your research. Just stay realistic that this is what can happen, and the best that I can do, I will definitely do it. And anticipate bottlenecks. So there might be some times, wherein the data is not available, or the software is not working, the machine is not available, or as small as that of electricity is not there. So since morning there was a power cut over here for 3 hours, and I was wondering whether I will have to take it on the next day. So such things may also happen, right, in your research. So there will be many more things, maybe just a methodology that you are trying to follow, but then it just doesn't work out, the tools are not working, or some or the other thing. The best is, whenever you come across such problems, best is you take a walk. Just go around, take a walk for 10 minutes, go out, sit with your siblings or sit with your colleagues, have a tea or something like that, just come back, and now you have a different perspective, different way of looking at the problem that you are facing. So anticipate bottlenecks, anticipate that there will be some or the other drawbacks that will show up on your path, and you have to know how to refresh yourself and build a new perspective. Communicate clearly with your supervisors, your the funding agencies, or with your colleagues. Often what happens is, this is one research that I have conceived, so I'm not going to talk about it to anybody, not even to my advisor, because I want to be the whole and soul of this particular research. So I don't want to talk about it, I will keep it to myself. The best is I read a lot and things like that. But then what you will realize in long run is that whenever you discuss your research with your friends, maybe with your mother as well, she might not even be understanding what exactly you are talking about, but then just prefer to talk about it, right? Talk about what you have been doing. Repeatedly tell somebody that this is your research problem. Listen to what they have to say. And with this, what will happen is that you will see that your perspective is growing, you are able to look at the wider picture of it. So without a timeline, research feels like wandering in the forest. With a timeline, you have a trail map, right? What is important? Expect delays, practice cushion time. So you might say that okay, in 1 week I will be able to complete this minor objective, right? But then it might not happen, so you can keep 2 or 3 days extra, so you have cushion time. If you feel in between that I want to rest, you can rest. So these are the cushion times. They give you comfort, that's all. Then what are elements of good timeline? What is a good timeline? um, a good timeline will include many things. So proposal development, your that will be included in your timeline. Data collection, what kind of data you will collect, so how much time will be required to collect that data, what kind of data is it, that will also define it. Writing and revising, data analysis. So data analysis comes first, okay? So data analysis, after you collect the data, data analysis will take some time. Writing and revising will also take some time, and then finally to disseminate what understanding you have gained through this project, that is also going to take time. So that is what essentially a good timeline is. Phases of research with milestone, you have to split your research into phases with small small milestones which you will treat as minor achievements. And then dependencies, if task B can't start until task A is done. For example, data collection if is not over, then you cannot start with data analysis. Now what are the different tools and techniques? The traditional uh, Gantt Gantt charts, these are the or Gantt charts or something like that. I'm so sorry, Gantt charts, these are charts, these are the traditional charts which are essentially made in Excel and Word. These are very simple and effective. We will be making one. So if you go to this particular link, you will get many templates on how to make these Gantt charts. Okay, I'm so sorry. So to make these charts, these are very very important when it comes to preparing your timelines. And besides this, recently there are these Trello charts that are also going on. They are also similar to that of these traditional charts, but you have a digital copy of it. If you want to print it, you can print it, and they are dynamic. So as and when you complete any task, you will see the completion in terms of percentage, right? Yes, the PPT will be shared. Now, there is also ChatGPT. Many of you have already used ChatGPT. Make best use of out of it. So, when you're using ChatGPT, you can generate a sample draft. So, ChatGPT, because it is a generative AI, it not only predicts, but it also tells you a lot of information that you might have otherwise missed onto, right? So chat gpt also, we will give one prompt and just see what kind of you know the timeline that it produces. And the current trend is wherein we merge these traditional uh, Gantt charts and Kanban boards. So you see both a bigger picture as well as the daily tasks. You know the higher objective as well as smaller objectives that are leading to it. Best practices for effective timelines. Now you will see me slightly running through this particular PPT. Okay, break tasks into 2 to 4 weeks chunks. You cannot break them into 2 or 3 days or 4 days like that. Break them into 2 to 4 weeks of chunk. Be realistic. That's what we want to look at. Use a smart principle of milestones. Be specific when you are deciding your timelines. Be specific, measurable. Measure how much data you need to do, so accordingly measure how many days you will require. See to it that they are achievable, they are relevant, and they are time bound. So you give yourself deadlines that until the second week I should be able to complete the data collection and things like that. So give deadlines to yourself. Always include a buffer of at least 10 to 20 times of 20% of your total time that you think otherwise ideally you are going to require for a given smaller objective. You add some cushion timing to it. Review your timeline. After every week or every month, you come back to your timeline and see where you are, how much you are yet to complete, and what else you need to include. Share with your supervisors, tell your friends, tell your peers, tell your advisor that this is where you have reached. That brings in a sense of accountability, that you are answerable to somebody, and that is when you will make the biggest progress. A research timeline is not rigid. A research timeline is not rigid, it's an ever changing document. So start simple, update it regularly. Make a simple chart first, update that chart regularly, and use digital tools to stay on track. Okay, so if we were to write it in a book, you might have to repeatedly, erase it and things like that. But making an Excel chart will be much more better. Then manuscript structuring and essential writing tips. We will run through this. So why a structure matters? Listen, just imagine this. Your teacher is telling you a story, and the story doesn't have a good structure. Mm, there are many characters, very little of them is covered, like very small incidences of these characters are there. So you are not able to develop liking towards any one character. So such stories that are haphazard, nobody would want to listen to them, isn't it? So your research articles or your manuscript, your thesis, your report, they are also like stories. They have to be clear, there has to be a clarity, they should be readable, there has to be readability, and people should be able to accept it. And when will they accept it? Only when it is a story. It's not just children who like stories, it is even adults who like stories. Even researchers, scientists, they would also want to read your article when it is told in the form of a story. When it's a story, it is more understandable, it develops your liking to read and to complete it until you reach the findings and generalization. So journals, no, they receive thousands of submissions every day as well. There might be hundreds of research articles that they must be receiving. So which ones they will prioritize? They will prioritize those which are credible, which have a clear organization of data, and the findings are solely based on the research findings. So there should be not a lot of prediction or assumption should not be there. There has to be some um, everything that is supported or backed by data. So think of your paper like a story. You wouldn't want to read a story that lacks structure and sequential circumstances described. So very small circumstances that are described, you wouldn't want to read that. If it lacks any structure, you wouldn't want to read it. So you look at your research article in the third person perspective. Be the third person, read your article, read your report, and see whether you are liking it then, because as the first person you will definitely like it. Then standard structure. What is a standard structure for any of your writing? It always follows this IMRD structure. What does it stand for? I stands for introduction, that gives you a context as to what is already known. It also tells you the gap as to what is missing from this context, from this already available or known structure. And it also makes you aware of what are the objectives. So in introduction, these three aspects should be covered. So introduction first, and then methods. Methods will talk about how the study was conducted, what kind of data sources were used, which tools were used to process the data, which softwares were used, and what kind of analysis, which method was used to analyze the data. As well as it must be detailed, as we said earlier, that if somebody else sitting at some other corner of the world um, would want to take up your methodology for their environment, they should be able to do it with accessibility, and they should be able to understand your language, and that your method has to be more descriptive and elaborate. Next, R stands for results. So after you have processed your data, the data is interpreted, you have results. What did you find? That is what you talk about in results. You talk about facts using figures and tables and illustrations and things like that, and you present your findings without interpreting it. You don't make any interpretations in your results. Interpretations are essentially made in the next section, that is D for discussion. What do the results mean? This is where you interpret what the results mean, and compare your results with that of somebody else's results. And that is, somebody else must have also used similar data to maybe make their deductions. So you compare your data with their data and see what they have deduced and what you are deducing, and make a comment on it. And you also talk about what were the limitations of your study, and what should be done in future to overcome those limitations, because limitations should never be left how it is. As it is, you might prefer to work on the limitations of your study, or somebody else might feel more interested or curious about coming over those limitations. So you have to state the limitations. Some journals also include graphical abstracts, so you have to keep yourself aware of these concept, graphical abstracts and highlights. So what these highlights are, these are some salient findings, no, of your study, the main important findings as to why somebody has to read. So if I ask you to produce 3 to 5 bullet points of what your study areas of what your research speaks of, then you should be able to put it across very confidently, so that somebody will decide whether it is credible for me to read it or not. So this is the structure: introduction, then comes method, then results, and then comes discussion. So IMRD, that is the structure. In between you have literature review, and then after discussion you also attach conclusion. This is like a summary of your discussion, of what you have found, of your methods as well. So introduction talks of why, methods talks of how, results talks of what you have found, what exactly, and discussions on so what. If you have found this, what? How it is significant, right? So besides this, there are some additional essential sections as well. There comes an abstract along with your, whether it is a report, whether it is a thesis, whether it is a mm, a manuscript. There is an abstract which is a short summary of everything, and you essentially write this at the very last. After you write all the sections, that is when you write abstract. I find it really funny when my advisor used to tell me, Diksha, just write an abstract for your paper, and I was like, so okay, yes, I will write. And I would even write it, and then at the end, when I would finish a manuscript and I go back to my abstract, it feels like the abstract is not at all representative of what I have written, right? So that's just something very funny. And then along with abstracts also come keywords, some at least 4 to 6 keywords that if somebody searches for them, no, then you should be able to find it. I'll tell you one story. So when my first research article was to be communicated, my guide told me you have to find one such keyword that if I press onto in Google that this particular keyword, your paper has to show up. So I said, okay, what should be my keyword? And then after a long thought, I would say after at least 1 or 2 weeks, I came up with this: engineered coast. So that was the keyword. And if you type in engineered coast, my article you will find on the very first search page itself. So that should be your intent. Then references, so you can use this Zotero, Mendeley, and EndNote to manage your references so that you don't lose track of it. Believe me, managing references, if you have not done it previously all throughout while you were writing your thesis, then it is really a troublesome task. You have to acknowledge to those who have helped you all throughout, and some supplementary material. These are supplementary materials are usually if it is some raw data that you have to produce, it is important. Then essentially the raw data and things like that, the very elaborate tables, you give them as supplementary materials, right? So that with that, best practices: follow journal guidelines very strictly, look at the word limits that have been told, the headings. So I have given one such link here. You can go here and just check what are the different instructions that come. Write clear topic sentences at the start of each paragraph. Each paragraph has to start with confidence. With this, you will know that yes, it is going to be relevant whatever I read through the paragraph. That every time that you complete one paragraph, you see that your energy is lost. So the next paragraph that starts, it has to start energetically, right? So keep that in mind. Use figures and tables very strategically. Don't just blindly give your raw tables. You produce them into statistical manner, such that they are able to convey more than otherwise if they were just raw tables, right? Mm. And ensure that there is a logical flow. There's a problem that you have identified, the method that you have decided you will use with, and then these are the findings that you will come up with after following the method, and what these findings really mean. So that logical flow has to be ensured even in your manuscript. Apply parallel structure in discussion, in results and discussion. So discuss findings in same order. If let's say in your results there are three different types of results that you are giving, then even in discussion you follow the same order, that the first results that you have obtained, that is discussed first, then the second results, and then the third result. So that sequence has to be maintained. AI tools, coming to AI tools, you can use AI tools no matter which one it is: Perplexity, whether it is Gemini, or it is Chat GPT, as generic as that. You first use them to prepare your outline. Outline is important. You have to structure your outline first. With these AI tools, you need not sit with a notebook and draw your own outline. AI might help you, and then you can correct them as per your requirement. Summarize each section. You can use AI to even ask it, okay, fine, this is my research problem. I need to write an introduction session. What are the different things that I have to include in this introduction? right? So such one thing also we will do, one exercise also we will do. And then checking flow and clarity, make sure that not just your one paragraph leads to another and that they are in sequential order, but also one sentence leads to another. So you should not be using such adjacent sentences which are just not dependent upon one another. One has to lead to another. So this is something that you have to keep in mind. Always rewrite in your own words. If you don't write in your own words, you might, I don't know how much you might have developed liking for somebody's writing, you cannot use as it is in your study. You have to definitely use your own language to describe it, right? Yes, so there are tools which can identify there is something called AI detection. So AI generated, AI contributed. So there are some softwares now that are coming up that they are able to identify which content is coming from AI. So that is why, no, we are, yet again I would like to tell you, don't make AI write your entire manuscript. You can use them for grammatical changes. You can ask them to structure your manuscript, that is, preparing an outline, also to summarize in the sense what, for example, if I'm writing introduction for so and so, for example, let's say land use land cover changes from 2001 to 2025, if this is the article name or the project name for Delhi. So if I give this and if I ask chat gpt, okay, what are the different questions that I need to answer in introduction section, then chat gpt is very helpful to me. So it is going to tell me what are the questions that I have to answer in that particular section. It is not going to answer the questions for me, right? So this is what we call ethical usage. We have a question as to what is the allowed manuscript, okay, percentage of AI is allowed. So I don't really know, my dear, as to how much of percentage of AI generated content should be used. You may refer to the formatting or the guidelines that come from university or things like that. But I would suggest that AI generated content should at all not be there. You use it very mindfully in order to improvise your your structure sentence framing, or the kind of content that you have to use. Don't go on asking generative AI to frame answers for it. That will be unethical, and it is not even going to be valid, that I would tell you. Why I would say this is that I think I must have used a vast amount of AI than anybody else in this particular meeting. I mean, I will take that particular flag. I will tell you that every time that I ask ChatGPT any given research question, no, it tells me the most generic, most mainstream, something that might not even be related to the kind of study that I'm doing. And that is where I find AI very general. It tries to give you very general answer, maybe because I have not used a subscribed version, a subscription of that AI tool that I use. Maybe that is the reason, but then yes, this is how it is, right? So always rewrite in your own words and avoid that plagiarism. So this one important message. The message is that good manuscripts are not about fancy words. They are about clear structure and logical flow. Readers should never feel lost. If you are using very high quality huge what I should say, mm, some huge jargons you are using that only your field understands, somebody else's field might not be able to understand those. For example, if I say something like divergent plate setting, so that is something that only geologists will know, not somebody who is in ecology or something that they will know, right? So you have to avoid using such jargons wherever possible. At places it might not be really possible, that but then make sure that your writing is very simple. That brings me to tell you one more thing. AI writes very, very sophisticated language. I would say that you read it and you find, oh my god, really these sentences can be generated by human? No. Okay, so when you draft your next paper, sketch that IMRD outline first. You have to draft that outline first, take help from chat gpt. It makes a wonderful outline for you that you can later amend as per your requirement, and it will save you hours and hours altogether. Because if you start writing, you don't have a structure as to what you need to write. My god, a difficult thing. You have to have an outline first and then go ahead for writing it. So writing skills really matter. Research isn't complete until it's communicated. If you did some research, you communicate it, tell it to others. And how do you tell it to others? You don't tell it to your relatives or to your friends who are in some other field, isn't it? You tell them to like-minded researchers, to those who are working in the similar setting, and to then later serve as a bigger purpose for your uh, in your field, to be known that yes, this is what I found, this is what is my contribution to the field that I have long been associated with. So it increases chances of publication and citation. When you have better, when you have polished your writing skills, it will increase your chances of getting that work published. Um, make make your research understandable to others. You have to write in such a way that your research can be understood even by a layman, maybe even by a primary teacher who would want to read, right, your paper, because she found, okay, fine, your article is really really interesting, or that it is on the same environment that she lives in, maybe on the village or maybe in the town that she lives in, right? So she should be able to understand. She shouldn't there's no way that they are going to say, oh wow, wonderful, wonderful language, nice jargons, and they won't say that. They will be like, okay, I don't feel like reading it because it's just too much of technical words, I'm not able to understand it, something like that. So your manuscript or your report should be understandable by somebody um, who is not even in your field. So build your academic reputation. If you write well, many people read you, and that is how you build your academic reputation. Great research hidden in poor writing is like a diamond that is locked in a drawer. So you wouldn't want to lock your manuscript in a drawer. You would want it to be written. You would want it to be read, right? And yes, so core principles of good academic writing: clarity. There has to be clarity. Use simple words instead of using utilize. You use. Very simple, as simple as that. You don't require a chat gpt for it or any other ai. Brevity. The sentences should be very small, and there should be not something that is, not necessary. Unnecessary things should not be there. Precision. Use accurate terms, avoid vague phrases. Some studies suggest, so you have to speak of the which studies suggest rather than saying some studies suggest. So it's just one straightforward way of telling that. And logical flow: each paragraph one idea, connect one paragraph to another, connect one sentence to another. Use those connecting words like however, in contrast, therefore, and things like that. So find such. So I have given you one suggestion. There is this one course on Coursera. It is free. You can all attend this. It is run by Stanford University. Um, a wonderful teacher. Her name is Christine Sainani. So she instructs this course. It goes by the name Writing in the Sciences. Wonderful course. I would tell you, I have taken it 3 4 times. My God, I have lost a track of whether I went even in order. But then best is once you complete writing your thesis or your manuscript, go to this particular course one by one. Just find this course, because I couldn't yes, on Coursera you have this course which is run by Stanford University. Dr. Christine Sainani is a wonderful lady. Smiles all throughout her lectures and tells you stories and gives you examples, and they you will find them very relevant to the kind of work that you are going through and things like that. So you will enjoy her lectures. They are just 5 minutes, 3 minutes, like that, so you feel good about it. So you can just take a walk after half an hour and come back and do it. So what I would say is complete your manuscript and then go to her lectures, and one lecture by one lecture, your thesis will also take a wonderful shape, right? So do take that particular course. I always tell my students, whoever comes to me for any writing suggestions, just go through her lectures. Wonderful class. So, common mistakes: overloading with jargons. We have already discussed it. Some terms that only you know, or your fraternity knows, or your field people knows. Somebody else might not knowing it. Avoid using them wherever it is possible. Copy pasting instead of paraphrasing. It will bring plagiarism risk. Writing results discussions mixed. So when you write your results and discussions together, that's something that you have to avoid. You have to write your results separately and write your discussions separately. Often we just write our manuscript. I remember my third manuscript that got published. I was just in a hurry. I thought I grew overconfident about the language that I have used, and without any proofreading I happened to send it across. So there were so many grammar mistakes, silly grammar mistakes, spelling mistakes were there. Even r spellings were wrong. I have written aer. It's just silly. So you don't want to be seen as silly as I was seen that time. You have to follow the formatting that has been asked for, so you cannot neglect them. And one more thing that I would want to tell you, no, never write your results in just one section. Make several subsections to it. Okay, that's fine. So in your results, in your discussions, make sure that there are subsections, so that the reader feels that yes, he is going in order. So it should not be like, even in methodology, everything just, paragraph after paragraph, all methodology. No, don't go for that. Go for sub layering, like your cakes. No, the cake that you cut at your yes, you can use grammarly. Yes, definitely you can use grammarly. A paid version of it, wonderful. So what was I saying? uh, yeah. So if bring you a cake that just has one bread layer, right? So you wouldn't want to eat it, isn't it? Because it will be dry at the core of it, and then at the sides only it will taste sugary sweet nice, but then at the center it will be chunky chewy and no sugar at all, like that. So you wouldn't want to eat that cake, isn't it? So you would want to go for layers, those cakes which have layers, and then cream that is sandwiched in between. Wow, wonderful, brings water to my mouth. Yes. So your section should also have some subsections. They might be completely independent or might be one leading to another, but then subsections is the key. Again, I'm referring to this reference managers again and again, because I don't want you to get troubled with the references at the very last. Manage your references. Use Zotero, use Mendeley, whichever that you feel is good to your eyes. Find that all are equally important, or equally good. So they also help you in auto generating citation. You just have to click, okay, this is the author, and then the suggestions will pop up and you can write. So side by side, even your reference list will get populated. There are enormous number of videos on how to use these citation managers. Use them. Visual abstracts, yet again, the graphical abstracts, these are very popular. There's a link that I have given to one of the graphical representation. It is on some coastal erosion. Just go and read those pointers, the salient features of this research that they have given. You, though you don't work in coastal erosion, you will feel like reading that particular article. So such wonderful is the story about these graphical representations. Then what are the best practices? And we are closing it here. Write daily, no matter whether you feel that I'm in a writer's block or not. Just write whatever that you know. Just write, even small sections, just like my advisor told me, write at least 50 words a day. Is it a big task? No, just write 50 words a day, right? Then always draft, revise your script, proofread it, and then you go for finalizing. Don't be a fool like that of me, who just sent her manuscript as it was, and then those comments, I cannot forget them. So seek peer feedback before submission. Don't just send it across to your manuscript. Even if you, let's say, you revised it, proofread it, you finalized it, don't go for submitting it. Send it to your advisor, ask them to read it. If you want, you can also send it to some other researchers that you came across while you were going through your literature. Follow this golden rule: write for readers, not for the reviewers. Reviewers will give you n number of comments that you will not like, but Write for the readers who will ultimately read it, not for the reviewers. Reviewers are there to check how credible it is and how best you can convince the reader that what you have done is correct and good, and that it is brought to a level that it can be published in the reputed journal. So that is the job of reviewer. You have to write for the reader. If you feel that whatever reviewer has told you are not agreeing to it, change the journal, go to some other journal, right? So writing is a skill, it is not a gift. You are not born with it. Like my guide also used to tell me that writing, Diksha, is not a gift. It is not a gift. It is a skill that you build over time, and only when you practice. You improve by practicing, and not practicing once in a month, regularly, and using the right tools. Use the right tools to when I say tools, I'm not really talking about AI tools, okay? I'm talking about essentially, if I was to tell you, I am essentially talking about that course on Coursera, writing in sciences. Just take that course. So start small, rewrite one paragraph of your thesis or article today using these clarity principles. Whatever you have learned in here, you can use them to uh, you know uh, go through your mm, writing. All right, so with that, let us go ahead and take up our exercises. So the first exercise that we are going to do is searching for our literature. So we will go to Google Scholar. You can simply press in your come to your Google, come to Google and go to Google Scholar. Okay, just go to Google Scholar. uh, I cannot really tell you right now as to which are the biannual journals, but now the trend is, even with Science Direct, as and when they feel that yes, this particular journal is good publishable, they go for publishing. So their journal is like continuously running, right? Continuously running. Biannual journals, that means in a year twice only they will publish. I am not really at the very instant. I might not be able to tell you, but there are many journal finder tools. So if you have written the title of your manuscript, and maybe an abstract is ready, or you can just write an abstract for you. Like how you submit for conferences and things like that. Go to these journal finders and just add your title and abstract, and they give you a list of journals where your thesis your where your article can be published with highest matching and things like that. You get to see how long they take and things like that. Okay. So Google Scholar, I'm searching for land use, land cover change, and urban sprawl. So let me type in using those boolean operators, right? I want this LULC, okay, LULC to be there, that is land use, land cover, and there definitely has to be this word called change. This change word has to be there in the manuscript, okay? Um, I get some suggestions as well. Oh, yes, I will have to share my entire screen. Okay, so LULC and change. So change, I want it to be there, and then LULC, it may be seen as land use, land cover and things like that. Ma'am, if we want to cite a paper, but that paper also, what is that? No, it is not necessary, my dear. If you feel that the concept that you are using in your manuscript is completely covered by one article, then you cite that article itself. Often, what happens, one methodology that some other worker has published in their manuscript, from there you get to know about the methodology. So, you have this question whether to cite this paper or that paper. Then you have to see to it that the concepts are they used in the same manner that they were published in the original manuscript, then you will have to cite the original manuscript. Okay. Maybe this manuscript you can cite for some other concept, because definitely you must have found it relevant. So in that sense, okay, so let's search for this, let's see what we get. Okay, an analysis of land use, land cover change detection using remotely sensed data. Yes, so using remotely sensed data, good. I would want to go on these. And then you can also search for since when you want the data. Let's say since 2021, whatever is published, only those I want to see, because that particular research was published in 2014. So it is older, I feel. So you can search here a comparative review on land use, land cover. Yes, okay. So besides this, let's say I want to search for coastal erosion. I want there to be this word in that particular um, manuscript, that is coastal erosion has to be there mentioned. This word has to be there, and I want the word tropical to be there. Okay. See, I'm giving it many layers of filters. Tropical and remote sensing, or maybe just I will use uh, satellite. I will use satellite. Okay, so these are the keywords that I'm using. They have to be there in those manuscript, only then you show me. So ever since 2021, so these are the ones: a systematic review of oceanic atmospheric variations and coastal erosion. Coastal erosion is there in continental Latin America, historical trends, future projections, and management. That word tropical must also be there somewhere. Okay. So these are the researches. Now among these, what I can do, I can just open, see to it that it is published in a credible journal, that yes, MDPI is a credible journal, right? So I can read the abstract. In fact, I can read the entire manuscript here. This is an open access article, so open access, so I can even download it, store it within my um, the reference manager, whether Mendeley or EndNote or Zotero. So yes, the word tropical must also be there somewhere. Let me just search for it and show you. Tropical, yes, you see that tropical is also there. So all those words that I had given it, all are there. Okay, let's switch to the next one. The next one is elicit. You can just type elicit. You might have to register on this. I might have already registered, so you can sign up using your Google account. Okay, you may sign up using your Google account. This is a nice tool. You can write your research question. So I had asked you to prepare a research question, isn't it? So let me punch in my research question. So I have pasted one question. It is evaluating how what is the strength of my question. So I it's a good research question that it is saying consider adding these elements. So what are the suggestions? Specificity. So my question is, which are the different forces that drive coastal erosion? So if I want to make it specific, what are the relative contributions of wave energy, sea level rise, and sediment dynamics to coastal erosion rates in temperate marine environment? If I want to make it for geographic scope, how do natural and anthropogenic forces differ in driving coastal erosion across various geomorphological settings like rocky coastlines, sandy beaches, delta regions? And if I want to make it a quantitative assessment, to what extent can climate change induced factors be quantified as drivers of coastal erosion in vulnerable coastal regions? So if I want to remain with the question that I have asked, I can do that, but if you want to go ahead and make it more specific using these suggestions as well, you can do it. So I feel I should go for quantitative, yes, the quantitative measurement. This question I really like. So what I will do, I will go ahead and open this side by side. Go ahead and open a spreadsheet, okay, a Google spreadsheet. Open a Google spreadsheet, a blank one. If you want, you can as well give the same question to it, right? That is coastal erosion. So let me call it coastal erosion drivers. Yes, the session is getting recorded, but it won't be sent to you all, okay? Immediately, it won't be sent to you all. It will take longer, maybe a week or two. Okay, so this is the name that I'm giving to it. Let's pay attention to what we are doing for now, and then let's address what your worries are. Okay, so come back to Elicit. So this is where you have received a summary of top 4 resources. You can read this. There are these 4 references that have been identified to be the most relevant one, and based on that you have received these references. So here what you see is that you see the paper, okay, the what is that, the DOI, that is the link to this particular article, is also there, and the abstract summary is given. If you want, you can add any of these columns in this free version. You can add 2 columns. So let's say I also want to know what are the main findings of these articles, and I would also want to know what were their methodology. Okay, so this is important to me. Let's say you might also be interested in limitation. So what I will do, I will put this across. If you want, you can also load more, okay, you can also load more, but I will leave it up to you. So what I will do, I will just copy these 4 columns, no, of all the articles that have been suggested to me. Okay, I will copy this and I will paste them over here. Okay, I will paste them over here. So now what I can do, I will know, I am in a position to understand, like just compare these papers as to how really they are important, right? So let me just slightly increase the width of these. Okay, so what you can do, you can compare these papers. So you can also ask for loading more papers, okay, that can also happen. So you have all the abstracts, the abstracts you have, the findings you have, and the methodology that they have followed. A summary of all these is available. Now you can compare what these research articles speaks about, and based on this comparison you can then decide which is the most relevant one for you, right? So this is one Elicit. Besides that, the other is Research Rabbit. Let's go to Research Rabbit. Let's search for Research Rabbit. These are AI tools. Yet again, you sign up using your Gmail account itself. You can sign up. Okay. So here you can make a new collection for each theme that you are trying to search for. You can create a new collection. So I have made one collection on wave refraction. uh, So what you can do is you can search, or how could I, yes, there is one app that goes by